It's time we talked about this. As a radical strand of the far left starts to make young people a vehicle for their new ideas into the next generation, just how much legal headroom is there for the religious right to do the same? I think the conversation you're about to watch with Dr. Ben Carson on CNN answers so many questions because whether we like it or not, that debate has become the center of attention after Louisiana just passed a law legally mandating public schools to display the Ten Commandments in every classroom. There's so much to talk about with this one after you take a look at this.
Joining me now, Dr. Ben Carson. He served as housing secretary under Donald Trump. Dr. Carson, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Abby.
So you've said that you back Louisiana's new law that requires that the Ten Commandments are posted in public school classrooms. I wonder, would you favor a federal law requiring the same thing?
Well, you know, the Ten Commandments is the basis of civilization. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with teaching kids morals and values. I don't think that anybody could come up with a reason why we shouldn't teach children not to steal, not to kill, not to envy, not to lie, to respect their parents. These are all good things. These are things upon which civilized societies depend.
Subscribe to the channel for more discussions like this. Now, I think that last part is certainly true, but knowing how good Dr. Ben Carson is in formulating his ideas, maybe that statement doesn't hold itself up very well. Let me explain. As much as we criticize the modern far-left socialization of children into new gender and race ideas, I think it's equally important that no such intrusion into children's minds happens from the other side. I know a lot of you won't like to hear this, but we can agree that there's value in the Ten Commandments, while also understanding that they're embedded in a larger structure that is fundamentally religious in nature. And whether that idea is around gender identity or commandments, like keeping the Sabbath day holy, children's minds must not become the center of a tug of war from either side of the political spectrum. And certainly not when the platform for this is the taxpayer-funded public school system, where people of all ideologies, religions, and backgrounds would want their children to get inexpensive quality education. I think when someone like Dr. Ben Carson, who's very effective at pushing back against leftist indoctrination of children, when masks Louisiana's new law as simply an affirmation of basic codes of conduct, he's not really strengthening his own position for the future, especially considering he's one of the frontrunners to be America's potential future VP. I want to take a deeper look at the actual context of that bill itself, but let's further explore the rationale for that position.
I'm saying that the Ten Commandments comes from your religious belief in the Christian Bible. I mean, would you be comfortable, for example,
But are you saying...
Would you be comfortable, for example, with a public school hanging, you know, the 5 pillars of Islam in a classroom?
I wouldn't have any problem with that if that's what the people wanted.
So I wonder, would you have called the separation of God from the public square as a form of schizophrenia? I am curious about what you mean by that.
What I meant is if our founding document talks about our rights coming from God, if our Pledge of Allegiance says that we are one nation under God, if many courtrooms on the wall it says, "In God we trust," if every coin in our pocket and every bill in our wallet says, "In God we trust," but we say we're not supposed to talk about it, that's a form of schizophrenia.
I think Dr. Carson is conflating two important things here. There's a difference between a public school versus a community-run school. Of course, people are allowed to come together and create private school systems that align more with their broader worldview, but state-funded public schools cannot become an arena to do the same. The truth is, people need to have trust in the education system they send their children to, whatever the nature of it may be. Now here's the second conflation that Dr. Ben makes. You see it when Dr. Ben says the religious art and phrases are already part of the public sphere. That may be true, but in that case, he's not using the words public in the same sense in both. And you see that in something like the First Amendment as well, which at the same time is also a greater guarantor of the right to practice one's religion. The first sentence of the First Amendment reads, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press." In the US Constitution itself, that's the strongest argument that secularists put forward to the separation of the church and state. And when it comes to the particular bill in Louisiana that's at the heart of this debate, called the House Bill 71, you see it try to fly past those constitutional limits and precedents by trying to make them out as simply a part of the foundation of America's ideals and values using a subtext. The exact text of that bill partly reads, and I quote, "Each public school governing authority and the governing authority of each non-public school that receives state funds shall display the 10 Commandments in each building it uses in classroom in each school under its jurisdiction. You hardly ever find the state itself passing laws to display something in schools in a free society, which perhaps makes the skepticism understandable. But when Dr. Ben Carson starts connecting this debate to something like pride flags in schools or preferred gender pronouns, there's an area that opens up, which I think is worth exploring.
So speaking of code of conduct, Donald Trump, the former president, he said last night that he loves the 10 Commandments. He says that he loves that they are in public schools and that he urges people to read them. He's holding it up as a moral code, just as you have as well. But it also seems to be a moral code that he doesn't follow. He doesn't even try to follow. Does that seem right to you?
I wonder, does it seem right that people put up codes? I was talking to a young lady a few weeks ago, and she said in her school they're having Pride Day, and everybody must agree with it, and you can be expelled if you say something contrary to it, or if you don't use the proper pronoun.
And that's wrong. We've spoken out against that many times on this channel itself, but that doesn't mean two wrongs make a right. The answer to a modern leftist hold on education and curriculums is not to just add more stuff to the confusing mix that children have to learn, but to make sure their minds are left untainted by the partisan and narrow politics that define our modern race and gender debates. If there was a state-mandated display of something like the pride flag at public children's schools, we'd also speak out against that. And that's not because of the flag itself, but because the taxpayer-funded public education must remain free from those attempts at early indoctrination when children are not at an age to think critically about subjects, whether it be gender or religion.
I would agree with you if you can tell me what is wrong with thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not envy.
There's absolutely nothing.
Can you just explain to me what's wrong with those things?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with those things.
So
Dr.
why
Carson.
would we want to teach our children? Why would we want to teach our children those things then?
I think the issue at hand is a legal one. It's about whether or not the government can be in the business of telling public schools that they have to put up those words that, as objectionable as they may be, come from a particular religion. That's the question.
And I'm saying that those are codes of conduct that have universal application.
I would have liked Ben Carson to have made a stronger case for public schools remaining neutral, because you know well that a network like CNN would be more than happy to take sound bites from the interview and fearmonger about a future potential VP under Donald Trump. In a society and culture that has gone so far to the left on multiple issues, merely standing firm in the middle is enough resistance. You don't have to swing the pendulum all the way back, especially not when it's children that stand to lose in the process.